agenda is a request for bill introductions. Speaker Pro Tem Finch.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to join you in House Appropriations again. The request this morning is for R21 RS 1124. It is a House concurrent resolution that would amend the Kansas Constitution to restore legislative oversight to the administrative rules and regulations process in our state. It is an idea brought to my attention by the Attorney General, and we're happy to have him with us here this morning for this introduction, and we'd ask the committee to allow this request to go forward.
All right, Attorney General Schmidt, do you have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, no lengthy comments. I just want to thank the Speaker Pro Tem and the other leadership for their attention on this, and I think it's an idea worth considering and appreciate the committee's attention.
Thank you, General. Speaker Pro Tem, are you going to be making this a habit?
I think we're 2 for 2 on good ideas.
All right, is there a motion to introduce the resolution? Motion made by Representative Prail, second by Representative Sutton. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Resolution is introduced. Thank you very much. Any further bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none. Okay, committee, you should have received through email the minutes from the February 5th meeting. Were there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Moved by Representative Hoffman, second by Representative Estes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. All right, committee, you'll remember that when we had the discussion in regards to the budget for the state library, there was a brief discussion in regards to the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which is something that I had actually brought up due to the fact that when we did some children's tours in the state of North Carolina, and then also there are pockets of the state of Kansas that do offer this for children 0 to 5. And we're kind of talking about how we can integrate this into a statewide program. So it's my pleasure to introduce Nora Briggs, who is the executive director of the Dollywood Foundation, and she's going to give us an overview of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library and what other states have done as far as implementing this statewide. So Nora, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone, and good morning. And Dolly sends her greetings. Thank you for inviting me to provide you an overview of Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. And thank you, Representative Waymaster, for sharing with me your personal experience and impact with your family on the program. So I thought today's briefing, in order to be as expeditious as possible, but to give you kind of the overview, would focus and showcase on the Dollywood Foundation, Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, and how it works, highlight why it's important and its impacts, and then look at the programs that we have in the state of Kansas, take a look at a few recent surveys and effectiveness in regards to kindergarten readiness, and then outline what it would look like at a statewide program, the roles and functions of a state level organization, and then share with you how a shared funding model, what it looks like, what that means. And then I'd like to close with a word from Dolly. So I know it's a lot, so we're going to begin, and I'm going to share a PowerPoint. So if you'll just give me a moment, I'd like to just make sure that we're good to go. Perfect. Can everyone see?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you. Okay, so the Dollywood Foundation is Dolly Parton's nonprofit, which she created in 1988, really to inspire children to dream more, learn more, care more, and therefore they can be more. She envisioned creating a lifelong love of reading and inspiring children to dream, right? Dolly says you can never get enough books into the hands of enough children. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library is the flagship program of the Dollywood Foundation, and it is a grassroots, community by community book gifting program, reaching more children than any other early childhood book gifting program. We mail high quality, age appropriate books to children from birth until age 5, free to the family, no matter their income. We have gifted over 152 million books since starting the program in 1995. And we're currently gifting 1.7 monthly books in 5 countries, the US, UK, Canada, Ireland, and Australia. And we were awarded the Best Practice Award from the US Library of Congress for addressing social barriers to literacy. And how it works is we partner with local communities who want to bring it into their local area. That community specifies a geography. That geography or coverage area can be one zip code, multiple zip codes, a city, a school, district, a county, or even an entire state. And the key that makes it special is all children in that community are eligible with no means testing. The Dollywood Foundation provides the infrastructure of the Imagination Library program. We select the books, we negotiate the purchase and the purchasing of the rights. We specially manufacture the books. The books are specially created in terms of size and they're age appropriate based on the child's age. They encompass a special Imagination Library logo. They have reading tips for the parents on the book flaps and a letter from Dolly. We handle all of the administration overhead. We handle the shipping and we fulfill on the monthly book delivery. Our local community partners promote the program in their local area. They find and enroll children in a secure database that the Dollywood Foundation provides, and they secure funding and pay a small subsidized amount, about $2.10 per child per month. And that's it. We do all the heavy lifting, right? The kids get their books and both parents and children love it. It's a charity. It's not a charity program. And that's the thing. It's a gift. It's a gift from the community and from Dolly. And communities raise funds. They go to 100% to their children in their coverage area. And then registered children receive that specially selected book. It's personalized with their name on the label, mailed to their home, contactless every month until their 5th birthday at no cost to the child's family. Kids can be registered as early as birth. They get 1 book a month for a total of 60 books if they stay in their program until their 5th birthday. And leading brain science tells us this is important because babies' brains develop very rapidly. They develop by age 9. By age 4. So if we wait till kindergarten to expose a child to books and reading, it's really too late. It's the early experiences that build brain, especially around the cognitive, language, imagination, and understanding. And leading brain science also tells us that the reading network in a child's brain doesn't naturally exist, and it must be built. And how it's built is through interactive reading. We know that reading is the key for lifelong learning. And since we need to get to reach children before kindergarten, we know that we'll be reaching them mostly in their home. Parents then become the first and most influential teacher for that child. In order to read at home, you need books, and that's where we come in together. Having books in the home really makes it easier for families to get children interested in reading. So the program supports the parents' natural efforts to make their children as successful in life and healthy in life as possible. And why it matters is really about the love connection piece, right? Books delivered to the home creates an event. It's the snuggling and the sharing and the interaction
and reading together that provides a unique shared bond, provides connection between the children, the caregivers, the family members, the neighbors, the siblings, even the pets. Because the book comes every month, there's a frequency to that. There's a frequency to the connection. And the books are labeled with the child's name, so they know it's theirs. There's a sense of ownership and pride. The book belongs to a child. We know that books and reading strengthen the home environment. And we know that reading routines have evidence-based results linking to healthier mental outcomes. That's especially critical now. Imagination Library is a contactless program, right? Especially perfect for the times that we're living in now with COVID. It also works really well for rural communities or geographically isolated areas or communities. As long as someone has a valid address with a mailbox, the books will get to them. And it's for all 0 to 5 Kansas children. Dolly calls this her heart program. Children will continue to do what they love to do. So we want to connect their hearts to books and reading when it's special, when it's fun, when it's before skills and drills in school. So this is just 2 of the thousands of pictures and letters that we get from parents. Also, we get them from children when they're old enough to read. These 2 just happen to be addressed to me. They're untouched in the way that they were sent. And I love reading them. I love looking at the photos because I know that this is making a difference in that child's life, in the family life. I also know that it's important to realize that parents shouldn't have to pick between having books and basic necessities like food. So I love the fact that we together as the larger community, all engaged, can bring books into the home. Now, our local partners frequently survey parents and happen to have one from a Kansas program. And this was just one of many questions. And it was one question about the frequency of reading now that they're getting books in the mail every month. How often are they reading these Imagination Library books? And if you read the comments, 3 to 10 books a day. Wesson loves his book. My 2-year-old loves to read as well. We're reading together. 5 books a night, several books a day. We read in the morning and mostly before bed. We read as much as possible. We read together. She's putting words and photos together. She can read it from her memory. She's read the book so much. The boys are loving the books, 10 to 20 books a day. And reading is part of our bedtime routine. Right? We know that this is playing an important role in strengthening the home environment, as well as what Dolly says, connecting their hearts, right, to books and reading. And we know that there's a big impact. We know that in the home literacy environment, that reading multiple times a week increases, 3 times a week. We know that reading more than once a day nearly doubles because you have books coming into home creating that event. We see a marked increase in kindergarten readiness, on average 29%. We also see stronger 3rd grade reading scores and higher achievement tests and scoring, and all the way through 3rd and 4th grade, which is many years after participating as they graduate out on their 5th birthday. And knowing matters because it creates a community ripple effect. You have entire families engaging around reading as they build their home library, and having the book come into the home, having a child make their parent, their caregiver, their loved one, their older sibling, their younger sibling, do something with the book. It either creates or increases that one-on-one time in the family between the parent and the child or the caregiver. And we know how important that is for the out years, for the future years, where we need parent involvement to keep children interested and helping them with their learning and development. We know that established reading routines help increase stability, emotional well-being, and improved atmosphere in families. It really strengthens families. And we're giving parents and caregivers and families a tool to help reduce the family tension and improve communication. Young children do not have the words and the vocabularies to express when they're feeling stress or they're feeling insecure, but reading together creates that dialogue and that comfort, which sometimes helps get family through difficult situations. And you get a community ripple effect. You get communities engaged in their library. You get them engaged with other literacy programs. It also creates a shared bond among children, especially important when starting in kindergarten. And we know that children's books and children's illustrations, very simple, are a great way to teach English and to teach reading. So the Imagination Library program can connect into adult literacy and other dual language program, and it helps expand that community betterment. Education is an equalizer. So just a quick overview of what we have going on in Kansas. So we have a lot of programs going on in Kansas. So we have approximately 183,000 children. So that's eligible children between 0 and 5 years. And we currently have 39,000, so almost about 40,000 children enrolled. So that's almost 22% of all the eligible children in the state. You have really great coverage. You already have great community engagement with 79 affiliates across 59 counties. Now, I will mention that not every county is covered in its entirety, which means not all zip codes, because programs can pick to have just one zip code or a small number of zip codes. So you have 59 counties that have programs. They would all be partial. And then you have about 46 counties with no programs. So we have a lot of place to go and expand. One important thing that I wanted to point out is that registration is opt-in. It's not mandatory. And the data is managed by the Dollywood Foundation. We are considered the data compliant officer. We are GDPR data privacy compliant, which general data protection requirements are what is required in the EU. They're very rigorous standards around data protection and data control, and that really is focused, as we would expect, on the PII data. So in addition to parent surveys, local programs partner with their school districts to measure effectiveness and results. So these are some fairly recent results that were shared with us, and they're reading assessment scores. And you can see, so it's completely in touch. This is exactly the way that I got the data. You can see in red, Dolly Parton's Imagination Library participants consistently outscoring their non-Imagination Library participants. In particular, this was a spring reading MAP assessment. And you can see, it's not just kindergarten when they come in, it's not just first grade, but you see them performing better. This one just happens to go up to 9th grade. And when I took away at looking at this, I see the 18 and 19, 2019 shows very consistent results. Almost every grade, they're scoring higher on this particular test all the way through 9th grade. With a statewide program, I'll just note that there is also typically legislative reporting on number of programs, number of children, and then also collaboration with Department of Education. Some of the other states have put student record flags, and that tracks a child, whether they were in the Imagination Library program and for how long and the number of months, track the effectiveness and track their all the way through kindergarten, 3rd grade, 8th grade, graduation, and then post-high school. So you can really see the impact. Just simply getting a book into the home creates a ripple in a family, in a community. It's big impact, low cost, low effort, low risk, inclusive, turnkey, scalable. It also becomes a draw for other children and family service offerings. It's a very simply designed, effective way to make Kansas community better places to live. This would be a quick view of what a statewide organization, the structure would look like. So you would establish an Imagination Library of Kansas, which is basically like an umbrella organization for the local county programs. And it can be a standalone, or it can sit naturally within an existing state agency, division, and cabinet. And the Dollywood Foundation is your partner with both the state level organizations and the regional and local support. And the three main functions of a statewide organization is to promote, grow, and sustain an Imagination Library program in every county in Kansas. So you have 105 counties. So the goal would be to have one program that covers every zip code in that county. And best practice is one per county, but we know that that doesn't always work sometimes. So we would work with what you have in existing programs and then eventually morph them together or figure out how they work best. And then we would also make sure that we would want to include the 0 to 5 children in the foster care or child protective services. And we would have a separate program for them because of the data privacy requirements. And a state level Imagination Library of Kansas organization would oversee kind of that umbrella state level organization, statewide marketing and awareness. It would help develop programs in each county and would also develop statewide partners who would help with the funding model and administer a dollar match fund. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library provides a shared funding stakeholder model. So the foundation covers the overhead and administrative costs associated for making the programs available in the local communities. If you remember, the local partners are responsible for reduced book and mailing expenses for their children in their local community. We recommend a state 50% match developed in coordination with state leaders, public funds, federal grants, and private funds, providing the local programs a 50% dollar match partner. This generates a powerful public and private partnership and is proven to be a very scalable and sustainable partnership, really for a number of reasons. The approach keeps a statewide effort from being positioned as a government program. It's not seen as charity, but instead with each county having local ownership via a matching investment and local stakeholders, this produces an attractive and sustainable public-private partnership. I've outlined what it would look like in terms of primary roles. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library does the heavy lifting in terms of the infrastructure of the program. We also help with the support and bringing community partners to the table for local programs, as well as statewide partners, like we have a partnership with the state rural electric co-ops and other private entities. We could also help with writing federal grants in order to help provide some of the matching funds. And some of the most stable and successful state programs are the ones where there's that $50 match. So a local program is only required to come up with $1.05 per month or $12.50. And then a kind of a bucket of money gets pooled together in order to create that 50% matchment. Some examples of funding sources. A lot of states are using lottery or tobacco funds. They're running Imagination Library programs or a statewide organization through the library system. So they're using maybe a federal library grant. This Imagination Library program qualifies for Title I funds. We have programs with the Bureau of Indian Education and Affairs. There is money there for this program in Native tribal lands, rural co-ops, CARES Act, COVID relief, private corporations coming up, and foundations to help create that shared funding model. Just a snapshot of existing statewide programs. I broke them out to where there's a 50% match or where a state is paying 100%. So Tennessee is our first statewide program. It's obviously our longest running program. So we're going on 17 years. They run at about a 70% saturation rate of all Tennessee 0 to 5 children. And they've actually used it as their baseline foundation and have morphed their statewide organization into providing services on top of the 0 to 5 area. They're doing book delivery and other programs in the K through 3 space as well. So they've really learned to use this as kind of their basis for drawing things around early literacy and providing home services and then building upon that. You can see Arkansas has actually been a statewide program, but it was more grassroots, and they didn't have a match dollar until we helped them write a federal grant, and they received a Striving Readers Grant. And so now they have a 50-50 match model for about the next 4 years. And then we'll be looking for state legislation to help bring about a program in order to be able to create a matching fund. Ohio launched a statewide program last year, or actually 2019. And last year, Oklahoma and Colorado signed legislation, and we're in the process of setting up that state level organization. And they'll be launching their statewide campaign in June of this year. West Virginia has been growing county by county, community by community, zip code by zip code for about, I want to say about 17 years. But they've gotten to a place where they have eligibility, so a true statewide program, which means every child in every zip code 0 to 5 is eligible to register or is eligible to sign up. And we now have a 50% match dollar coming from the Department of Education. Washington, D.C., North Carolina, and Delaware all have 100% funding, so the local programs don't pay anything. What's interesting to note is that the Delaware program is being run through the state library system. So we have a lot going on. We also have some programs in progress. So I'll share with you that South Carolina is looking at a statewide imagination library program. That would also be run through the state library system. We're looking at legislation in Kentucky. New Mexico has taken the community by community route, and Maine is looking to also write legislation in the near future. I know that's an awful lot of information to pack in about 22 minutes, and I'm hoping we'll have lots of opportunity to get you more information, ask some questions. But if I can and it works, I'd like to close, please, with a word from Dolly.
Hi, everybody. This is Dolly. Before he passed away, my daddy told me that the Imagination Library probably was the most important thing I'd ever done. Now, I can't tell you how much that meant to me because I created the Imagination Library as a tribute to my daddy. He was the smartest man I've ever known, but I knew in my heart his inability to read probably kept him from seeing all his dreams come true. Inspiring kids to love to read became my mission. In the beginning, my hope was simply to inspire the children in my home county. But here we are today with a worldwide program that gives a book a month to over 1 million children. Of course, I have not done this alone. The real heroes of our story was the thousands of local organizations who have embraced my dream and made it their own. They raise millions of dollars each year and wake up every day with a passion to make sure that their kids have every opportunity to succeed. It's been quite a journey, but we have so much more left to do. Now, I'd love for your community to join our family, so please take the time to explore our website. Let's share this dream that all children should grow up in a home full of books. The first step is always the hardest, but you will never know unless you try.
I'm so glad I
Right.
was able to get that video to work for you. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, it was. And thank you, Ms. Briggs, for being here and giving us a presentation on what we can do as far as the first steps of implementing a statewide program across the state of Kansas. And I guess my first question would be, since we do have, some foundations or other entities across the state that do supply and fund the books for children. How would a hybrid model look for the state of Kansas to address the areas of the state that do not participate in the program?
So there's many options, many different, there's a variety of ways to get there. So having a statewide program would mean that we would try and get programs in every county. So one program in every county. And each county can actually be run as a different model. So we do have some foundational partners who pay 100% for children in particular areas, and those, but they may not be covering an entire community or a county. So we could, in a statewide level, there could be different funding models or match percentages for each one of those counties.
And if we would do the 50% state match, what would be the cost to the state at the beginning to implement this program?
So we have a cost calculator. So I took a look at that. You're starting out at about 22% of your total eligible population. And as you can imagine, you don't go putting on a light switch. You don't get all community partners to the table right away. You don't find all the families and get them enrolled. So it's a bit of a ramp up process. So it would take, I would say, about, to go from 22%, our best guess, what we've seen in other states, it would take you about 2 years or so to get up to that 60, 80%, 2.5 years. So I don't know, about year one at a matching model would be about $500,000. Year two would be $800,000 in order to get to about 60% of your children, if you're sharing a cost model.
And then in that 500 to 800,000 would also include the foster care children?
Yes. Yes.
It would. Okay.
It would. Yeah. And I think I might have shared, but the foster care or the foster children program would be slightly different, is that it sits in its own database, right, to take care of the data privacy concerns. And typically there'd be no community to go and look for a matching dollar amount. So a lot of corporations in our other states, they basically just write a check for the number of children times that amount every year and fund that program so that every child can be included.
Okay, thank you. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. You might have said this, in the local programs that exist now in Kansas, are most of them matched with community foundation type money?
I would say, let me see really quick. I don't know the exact answer, but I know that we have a large number. We have 26, I know off the top of my head. I have 26 of the 79 affiliates I know are 100% paid for by their foundations, but there might be a few more as well. So I can detail that out for you and provide that.
So there are other types of groups that, it's not all foundations in Kansas that do the match. There are other, maybe it's private corporations or, okay, just.
United Ways, Rotary Clubs, Christian organizations, local service groups. Some of the programs sometimes get Title I funds, or their school districts might help fund some of the children. So
Okay.
it's a variety of options.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, committee, are there any further questions for Ms. Briggs? Representative Helgerson.
I appreciate the good work that you do. I'm looking at the analysis that you showed about the higher consistency, higher performance on reading test scores. But has there been any analysis by an independent group that says these dollars are better spent on your program versus X other program? That would be very helpful.
Well, we have in our 25 years of running the Imagination Library programs, we have about 40 published research papers. We also have independent assessments which talk about the effectiveness of the program. And the 2 slides on the impact is really a summary of what they have found in their surveys and in their academic research. In particular, we have really good information from the state of Tennessee. They did a 10-year study. They're one of our longest running programs at a state level, and found direct correlation to the effectiveness, in particular to kindergarten readiness and achievement on the third and higher grade scores. So return on investment for early dollars, as you know, can be quite significant, right? Education carries them into being a educated citizen, providing for community, maybe less reliance on social services and other things. So we have a lot of information on that.
Representative Helgerson.
And I assume you'll provide all that, whatever we wish. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. Second
welcome.
question. In looking at this, it looks like most of Johnson, Wyandotte, and Leavenworth are not covered, some of the higher population areas. Is there a reason why?
Just means we haven't had a community partner step up and want to bring it in their area.
Okay, all right. And third, I'm going to go back to the chairman's point, emerging. If a not-for-profit is providing the funds for certain counties and the state stepped in on a 50-50 role, what have you found in other states? Does the donating entity already involved, do they want to share with the state? Do they basically cut back their 50%, their 100% contribution to 50%? Or what has been your experience when we move into certain areas like this?
So a few things happen typically in a program at a local community where they're paying 100%. There's always this constant struggle to ensure that they have funding so they can continue the program, right? So that it's consistent, it's sustainable. And when you offer a $50 match, that allows these programs to reach more children almost immediately. They can double the number of children enrolled. Because sometimes enrollment is kept at a steady level in order to meet its funding. So you can get to more families and more children by having some sort of dollar match or some sort of percentage as a payment. And we do have some programs, they just make sure that they go out and get more children. And that also provides additional funds for them to do other early childhood literacy programs, to run graduation programs with the library, to run other things that are related to early childhood literacy. So again, it just depends on the type of community and the type of funding support they have. But the goal is to get to more children. We've only got 40,000, right? We've got a lot more to go get in Kansas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to hear Dolly Parton come in Nashville at NCSL, where she talked about her program. And people left very enthused about the program. Obviously, whether it's $1.05 a month or $2.10, the foundation is actually picking up the bulk of the program. Am I correct?
It depends on how at the moment, a local program is responsible for the $2.10 per month, correct? But in a statewide program or a shared funding model, if you're doing 50%, then they would do $1.05. And it's really like a dollar match. So if they have 1,000 children, you're paying for 1,000 children. If they have 2,000 children, you're paying for 2,000 children.
Okay. I also heard you say that if a county was having difficulty, you helped them write grants in order to get a partner. Am I correct?
That is correct. So in a community level, we help connect them with funds, grants. At a state level, we also helped with the Striving Readers Grant. I think they've renamed that grant now, by putting in the component for 0 to 5 and showcasing how this can be a standalone tool or can work in conjunction with your other 0 to 5 early childhood programs.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited about this program, and I have a group, I'm from Lawrence, Kansas, and I have a group that are very excited about it. And we're in just plain citizens, but we would be willing to fund that as well if there wasn't an organization. So I think that's how excited I think people are for children to have books from 1 to 5, when that is really crucial. Of all the things we could do in this state to invest in our children and get them to the point that they can sustain, which is your third part of your goal, is what's really valuable, because those are the ones that are going to become really productive. So I thank you so much for being here this day.
Thank you. I'm
Representative-
super excited. Thank you.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Briggs, for being here. I was looking on the map, and I noticed that the county that I live is not listed as having a program, but of course, it's been many years ago now. When my kids were that age, they were receiving books. And so how do I find out who was supporting it before, and how do we go about setting that up again? Do we go to the website, or what's the process?
No, actually, that information would not be on the website, because if they close their program, it would show as an area that doesn't have an availability to either enroll or for some sort of connection. But I can get that information for you. My colleague, Pam Hunsinger, has been working for the Dollywood Foundation for 20 years. So she's probably the individual that has set up every single program, right, with the community partner in Kansas.
So I just email you, and you could find out.
Absolutely. Happy to share
Okay.
that with you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, any further questions for Ms. Briggs? All right, seeing none, I want to thank you again for being here and giving us an overview of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library and how we could possibly implement this statewide. I do want to say that when I got home from Topeka on Friday afternoon, in our mailbox, there was a book for my son from the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. So he loves reading, and it's just a great program. Like I said, when we talked about this with the state library, that we definitely signed him up the day he was born for this program. So I just want to thank you and thank Dolly Parton as well.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is an update from the Behavioral Health Initiatives. So I would invite Secretary of Department of Children and Families, Laura Howard. Secretary Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the chance to be here today. I guess for this purpose, I'm actually here as Secretary for KDADS. Actually, a little bit of both. It's a little hard to follow Dolly Parton in the Imagination Library, but I'll try to do my best. What a neat program. All right, I appreciate the chance to be here today and give you an update on behavioral health initiatives. I think the first thing I would say is you have a large document. I won't be going through the entire document, but I came before this committee a year ago and presented to you a plan related to building community capacity and lifting the moratorium. And so one of the things I felt like was important to provide you a full update to that plan. But again, today I'll just be highlighting the key behavioral health initiatives and how that connects to building community capacity and moving towards lifting the moratorium at Osawatomie State Hospital. There's a lot going on in behavioral health in Kansas right now. It's a very, very active and very, very fluid. So again, I'm pleased to provide you with an update. As I said, last year, I came before you, presented a plan to lift the moratorium on voluntary admissions, and told you at that time that, that plan is about a whole lot more than capacity at Osawatomie State Hospital. It's also about capacity in the community. And in fact, the vision for that plan, and a few words I'd like you to keep in mind during this presentation, is community-based, close to home, services close to family and community. So, as we begin to think about how we continue to move forward as a state to build that capacity, what I want to do today is to talk with you about how the plan has been impacted by the pandemic. We have had some delays, the progress that we're continuing to make, Some changes in the approved budget, some new things that have happened since last year in terms of behavioral health initiatives, and some potential for some added federal resources. But know this, lifting the moratorium continues to be a priority. It's been in place far too long. It's been in place 6 years since decertification took place at Osawatomie. We have to continue to make progress and be able to lift that moratorium, and I believe we're well on our way towards that. You know, obviously, this is a topic that this committee, many legislative committees have talked about for some time. The Mental Health Task Force for several years. This summer, the Mental Health Modernization Committee. But our goal, of course, is to lift the moratorium, prepare Osawatomie for the return of voluntary admissions. So what I'd like to talk to you about, beginning on page 2, I've got some graphics that just begin to demonstrate some of the interconnected pieces of our behavioral health system. And I'm going to focus first on those that are most directly connected to lifting the moratorium. There's a lot of behavioral health things I could talk to you about. There's some I won't talk to you about today in the interest of time, but I wanted to focus particularly on those pieces of community capacity building. On the top of page 3 of the testimony, you see a graphic that lists 5 elements. The first 2 have to do with building with additional capacity at Osawatomie State Hospital. These are facets that you approved last year. The ability to add some licensed beds in the short term, and then ultimately to increase certified beds at Osawatomie State Hospital by 12 additional beds through a remodeling of the Biddle building. And I'll give you an update on that status a little bit later on. We have had some delays in construction. We have had to use some of that space for isolation and quarantine during COVID, but the plan continues to be in place to do that. You know, a key component in the middle of that first bar is what's labeled as regional SIA beds. Last year, the governor recommended, and you supported funding to support the concept of contracting for beds in community psychiatric hospitals across the state. Again, services closer to homes and families. Initially, the budget was $5 million. That was reduced to $2.5 million in the allotment. And then our base budget already had $3.9 million that we had been using for Osawatomie diversion beds during the moratorium. So that leaves us $6.4 million related to those beds. We've worked very hard over the last several months to develop a methodology. We've worked with our Medicaid partners to create a new provider category. You'll hear SIA as we move forward, State Institution Alternative. So think about our regional bed conversation, think about SIA. So as we sit here today, we've had 1 provider enroll as an SIA provider, that's Prairie View in Newton. And yesterday, we received an application from KU in Wyandotte County that we're now reviewing. So again, very close to having 2 providers related to those regional beds. And I'll show you a map later on of the additional locations across the state as we continue to reach out to hospitals. I think just as we had some delays on the state hospital side, COVID has certainly understandably taken the attention of our private hospitals who've had to be focused on keeping patients safe, doing things within their facilities. But again, we're beginning that outreach again, just received the second application yesterday. I'll skip over to the last item on that first bar, crisis intervention and stabilization centers. These are also 2 critical components to lifting the moratorium. The legislature has funded supports for crisis stabilization services across the state through lotto vending machines. You'll see a map later on about the expansion of those services. Just in the last year, expansion of those services in Manhattan and Hayes. And then also, we were able to fund a crisis center in Lawrence that will open in the coming months. Based on the status of revenue to that fund, people have still been purchasing vending machine tickets during COVID. We also anticipate we will be able to expand by probably 3 more crisis centers across the state during fiscal year 22. The second half of that piece is Crisis Intervention Act. When I say crisis stabilization centers, we're really talking about crisis centers in the community that serve voluntary patients. And I think you all, some of you were on a mental health tour a couple years ago now, I guess it was, and we're able to actually see, I think you stopped in Manhattan, saw what they were trying to do, and we're able to see what some of those look like. But connected to that is the Crisis Intervention Act that was passed by the legislature a few years ago that would allow similar services for involuntary patients in the community. So we're also working hard on that. We have been reviewing regulations with stakeholders over the last few months, and we'll be starting that formal promulgation process. So we expect by the end of this year, we will have crisis intervention centers, most likely starting with those that are already crisis stabilization centers accepting involuntary patients yet this year. That's an important piece of this component. I'll talk to you about some numbers in just a minute. So when I talk about, the work in the community towards lifting the moratorium, those are the elements we talked about last year. A new element that I think is also important, that's also in that first bar, is mobile crisis response. The governor's budget includes $5 million in fiscal year 22 for KDADs to begin a program of mobile crisis response across the state for adults. This also complements funding that's in the DCF budget related to mobile crisis response for youth. So you think about an individual in crisis, you think about the ability for there to be mobile response from professionals, mental health professionals. Huge impact in terms of the burden on law enforcement and others, and huge impact on being able to address those crises at the front end, sometimes being able to alleviate the need for more acute services. So again, an additional component that we weren't talking about last year that's now rapidly in the conversation. The next set of bars I wanted to just lay out for this committee are just other things that have come up since the last legislative session. The federal government acted to create a 988 hotline number, like 911, but for mental health emergencies. Essentially, when you think about the suicide hotlines that are out there now, this creates an easy number. But just like 911, if you call a number, you want there to be a response. So not only do we need capacity to answer those calls, we need to know what might happen when those calls come in. And again, mobile crisis response is one piece that's important to that. And I know that this legislature is certainly looking at policy options related to the state's response to 988. And we did receive, as an agency, from our federal partners and from the National Suicide Prevention Hotline folks, a planning grant. And so from KDADs, we're pulling together a planning team of stakeholders over the course of the next 4 months, looking at what 988 might look like in Kansas. Also on this bar, I won't go over all the pieces here, but, also an active policy conversation in the legislature this year has to do with the certified community behavioral health clinics. Again, these are models of care that would require a broad array of services, provide prospective payments to likely community mental health centers who meet those standards, and have clear accountability tied into that. Many states have moved in this direction. There were some federal opportunities a few years ago for states to apply. Kansas was not an applicant at that time. But just in the last 2 months, we now have 6 community mental health centers in Kansas who've now received federal planning grants in total about $40 million to plan towards becoming those entities. So again, it's an important facet when we think about building community capacity, what we expect from our community mental health centers, or as they transition to certified community behavioral health clinics now or in the future, the broad array of services that would be provided. I think the last visual I wanted to talk just briefly about is on page 4. And I just wanted to mention issues around youth. Last year, the legislature approved funding to increase acute care capacity in Hayes after KVC had to close that facility down. The RFP for that expansion closed last week. We did receive bids, and we expect to have an award made in that regard by March. To move forward with that acute care for kids in Hayes. Also, since last legislative session, a little bit, if you think about acute care beds for kids as kind of the highest acuity, if you move down just a little bit, also since this time last year, 100 beds have been added to psychiatric residential treatment facilities across the state, again meeting critical gaps there. We also, you're actually probably one of the first to hear this. We also will be announcing within the next 2 or 3 weeks the first youth-based crisis stabilization program here in Topeka, funded with Lotto funds. Again, beginning to do a pilot of youth crisis stabilization beds. And then I already mentioned the Youth Mobile Crisis Response. Through a federal grant funds, we were able to begin this program this year. Just announced Beacon Health Solutions last week as the provider. They'll be working with community mental health centers across the state to set that up in the next 2 or 3 months. This will be mobile crisis response for youth and families, not just kids in the foster care system, but all youth. So if a child is having a behavioral health crisis anywhere in Kansas, there will be standards for what that response looks like. There will be a hotline number. Depending upon the acuity, there might be a mobile response within anywhere from 60 minutes to 72 hours, depending upon what the level of that response is. States that have done this, they've seen tremendous impact in terms of reducing the need for acute care services, also keeping foster care placement stable and safe. So again, crisis response, new since we talked with you about a plan last year. Again, I wanted to put those context pieces in, and then I just want to talk about our plans on how we move towards lifting the moratorium. So I'm not going to, again, go through all of the details here, but again, the plan to lift the moratorium, combination of expanding bed capacity at Osawatomie, ultimately to a net of 12 new certified beds where we would get federal matching funds, and increase in the community-based capacity through the regional SIA beds. Again, 2 providers so far. Prairie View has just finished its enrollment. KU has just applied. We spent a lot of time implementing the Medicaid policy and the state plan amendment over the last several months. I'm on page 5 of the document to create this state institution alternative. We've also amended a current contract with Health Source Solutions. They help us manage diversion beds related to Osawatomie now. They will help us manage this regional bed process. And we also have an RFP out on the street for an entity to manage that over the next 5 years. So if you look at page 6, I just wanted to point you to a map. These are where the state has adult inpatient psychiatric beds in where private hospitals have these beds. So right now in Newton, Prairie View, and now in Kansas City, KU has just applied to be state institution alternative beds. We'll also be looking and working with others. We'd like to have additional possibilities in Sedgwick County. We also think Salina or Hayes might be a possibility as well. And we've also had some interest due to a new initiative that might be taking place in Leavenworth to bring psychiatric beds to that community. And so, again, a lot of possibilities out there that we're continuing to work and talk with individuals about. I mentioned the crisis stabilization services. If you look at the map on page 7, you can see where the services are today. As we look towards fiscal year 22, we've had significant interest from Pittsburgh and Leavenworth as the next 2 communities who have been working locally to put together local coalitions and matching local resources to set up those crisis stabilization centers in those communities. I think Pittsburgh would be significant in the sense that there's really been a gap in Southeast Kansas. I continue to have interest, though, in making progress in Hutchinson, Dodge City, or Garden City in coming years, because I think there's definitely some gaps as we look towards Western Kansas. And as I said earlier, with the Crisis Intervention Act, the involuntary beds in terms of crisis services in the community, as we get those regs formally promulgated in the next few months, we expect that RSI in Wyandotte County, one of our original crisis stabilization centers, will be the first entity to accept involuntary patients. We've also had interest from Lawrence as their crisis center comes on board in the next coming months to also be a Crisis Intervention Act facility. And we've also had some interest in Topeka and Wichita. So a lot out there in terms of development of those community resources. The next pieces of the testimony I think I talked about already in the context of mobile crisis, just how that intersects with 988, how that intersects with connection to some of the community beds, either the regional SIA beds or the crisis stabilization beds. With regard to the inpatient capacity at Osawatomie, as I said, the approved budget, it did include funding to increase licensed beds at the Adair building by 14. Included funding for staff, operating costs, and remodeling. I'm on page 8 of my testimony. And the plan was to use the additional licensed bed space and what we were calling a pilot census management initiative to really begin to manage in a different way, to assess adults being screened for admission and who were awaiting admission, and to really work with our partner at HealthSource and our CMHCs to look across the available regional beds, the space at Osawatomie, the expanded access to crisis intervention centers, and find that right approach, closest to home, closest to family and community, that's most appropriate. Some of those plans got delayed because of COVID, and I certainly won't apologize for that in the sense that one of my critical goals at Osawatomie and Larned was to make sure that we were able to keep those hospitals open, that we weren't going to have to shut those doors due to COVID. So we did have to identify isolation space for existing patients as well as quarantine space with regard to new admissions. So that did cause some delay. We needed to use some of this space to do that. So as we look, but at the same time, we were able to continue to work in the design phase about remodeling. And we expect that first space to be ready by September. So we're about 6 months behind on that space. I think we're about 6 months behind on our plans to fully lift the moratorium. We had hoped for May. I think realistically, we're probably December, but I think we'll also see significant impact as we get those regional beds online. I might also mention, just over the course of this last weekend, there's been a lot of pressure at Osawatomie. Those waiting list numbers had gotten really, really high. We finished the quarantine of a particular unit in the last few days, and over the weekend, the superintendent and her team worked to reopen up a unit and admitted about 15 new patients over the weekend and reduced that waiting list back down to 10. And so again, took a lot of pressure off over the last few days. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over all of the construction pieces here, but no, our plans are still in place. We really just have had a short delay based on the way that COVID impacted those facilities and our desire to make sure that we could keep the doors of the hospital open by appropriately managing patients to keep COVID out and to contain it when it did enter. So we continue to be committed to lifting the moratorium. We're working hard on building that community capacity, making progress every day. And certainly the improving COVID conditions will also impact how existing bed capacity can be used at both of our hospitals. As I get close to finishing up here to take questions, we've got a timeline on page 12 that again moves to a December date to lifting the moratorium, but a May date to launch what we're calling a census management pilot at Osawatomie. Again, as we bring those regional SIA beds online, how we can begin to manage admissions in a different way to look first at close to family and community. That will also help us as we think about down the road what we might need in terms of changes to the Care and Treatment Act, likely in the next legislative session. I would close just by going over a summary chart that is on page 16, figure 6. The far left-hand column is what we showed you last year in our plan. The right two columns are where we are today. When we spoke with you last year, we were talking about contracting for regional diversion beds. Our language has changed, our methodology has changed a little bit with the SIA beds, but again, you can see we're looking for a capacity of 15 to 20 SIA beds. Again, Prairie View has enrolled, KU has just applied. Crisis intervention centers, we see going into the next fiscal year, these are the involuntary admissions in the community, probably starting with RSI. We expect 30 to 50 beds. As we get to the end of this year, probably 30 beds at the end of this calendar year, and then another 20 beds next year. Again, important community capacity. And then on the crisis stabilization side, related to the Lotto beds, with additional beds in likely Leavenworth and Pittsburgh, an additional 40 crisis stabilization beds. So, you know, there's a lot of things I didn't talk about today. On page 15, we do mention we are still working on the request for an IMD exclusion, and I think, frankly, these additional community supports make our application much stronger. We hope to get that application into our federal partners later this year. The plan isn't contingent on it, but certainly it would bring some new federal resources at our state hospitals and in our community. We also will be receiving some new federal funds through COVID relief from the very last bill. Probably $20 to $30 million in SAMHSA block grant funds, and I think some of those funds could be used for some one-time costs associated with some of these expansions. I didn't talk to you about forensics. I mean, I didn't talk with you about some of the work we're doing in conjunction with the Department of Corrections, with jails. You know, for example, we just announced in the last couple weeks that Kansas is the second state in the nation to open a Stepping Up Technical Assistance Center with the Council of State Governments Justice Center, and KDADS was very pleased to receive that. That will be work with jails to help local governments and jails make decisions on how best to support and keep out of jail folks with mental health and substance use disorders. Again, second state in the nation to open that TA center. There's a lot of things going on the forensic side, mobile competency, elderly, with the veterans. But I felt like today it was probably important to step back up and say, when we think about community capacity and how that intersects with our state hospitals, to give you that broader picture of how regional beds, crisis stabilization beds, mobile crisis, and our state hospitals fit together to build the capacity we need to serve individuals close to their families and communities, and finally be able to lift that moratorium at Osawatomie. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hope I didn't hurry through that too much, but.
No, you did fine. Thank you, Secretary Howard, for being here today. Committee, any questions for Secretary Howard? Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. It really starting to kind of gel with me. So your page 3, the top sort of 5 boxes, really to me illustrate how, and correct me if I don't have this right, how we can't put all our focus on Osawatomie. We have to focus on the stabilization centers that keep patients out of Osawatomie. I know that's happening in Wyandotte and Johnson County anyway. We're keeping a lot of the people that would normally go straight there, stopping there. And then which was a new term to me, your state institutional alternative, those regional beds will further help that. Are those voluntary or involuntary or both?
Both. The SIA beds will be both.
Okay. And then if you even, so I could definitely see how the answer to the problem is doing all of the above. And that will ultimately reduce our need to do all kinds of probably more expensive things at Osawatomie.
I mean, that's correct. I mean, our plan last year was very much focused, on the vision and values of how do we provide services and supports closer to home, as opposed to building, remodeling in any extensive way at Osawatomie. That didn't make a lot of sense to us. I also think it didn't follow the path of all of the various task forces and work that's been done. But you're exactly right. It's interconnected. And as we're now able to, us and our partners in the community, kind of refocus on identifying those additional community resources, that's a key piece, the interrelationship of these.
And then, if I might continue, Mr. Chairman, and then if you step back even farther to where sometimes the patient starts at the community mental health centers, it seems to me that the CCBHC would greatly enhance their ability to take and treat patients, and hopefully with the expanded level of treatment, or hopefully that would prevent some of the upward progression to more serious states of disease that cause them to end up in facilities.
I mean, that's correct, Representative. That whole model, and we only have to look next door to Missouri, who was one of the first states to do it, putting in place assertive community treatment teams, the intensity of support amongst the individuals, for example, who have repeat hospitalizations or are likely to be homeless and the like. They've seen a significant impact. Really all the states that have done it have. I often look to Missouri because they're our neighbor and also because they were in that first cohort of 6 states. So they have the most experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, I am pleased to hear this report, and you've made a lot of progress since we added this in our budget report in March of 2019 to come up with a report for us, comprehensive report on how to open, and then you did that. And in May in 2020, I offered the proviso to make sure that we had this on record. And you came back with, you would open in May 21st. And because of COVID, I think we've been a little concerned how long it would take to open. And yet, it was just delayed by, I would say, 6 months along those lines. And that becomes extremely important because we know that mental health is becoming even a more crisis in Kansas in many ways. What you indicated was that you were hoping to open between 12 and 14 new certified beds. And that, am I correct?
That's correct. At Osawatomie State Hospital, that would be certified federally. That's correct.
Yeah, and that was the best part about is, you know, the certified is that we get that federal match, which then we would get that additional money. Do you know how long that might take to get those certified beds? Because CMS is slow sometimes.
Well, I mean, that process will take longer, primarily because the construction will take longer, and we're still a couple years out from that. I think our estimate is that we would look to have a survey from CMS in February of 2023. By the time the construction finishes, which will really be taking place through most of 2022 for the Biddle building. So that will be a little bit delayed, but we don't believe that that will impact our ability to lift the moratorium.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions for the Secretary? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here. I guess a couple of things. I mean, I appreciate, it looks like we're making some progress, but I represent one of those areas that's, you know, the people that I deal with that need services, you know, I don't get a call between 8 and 5 and we talk for a half hour about how beautiful the day is. I have parents in tears, and they go, you know, I got to drive 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours. Is there a place for them? Where? And I guess one of the things I'm looking at is like the adult acute system. I mean, is there a way to work maybe with the KU health system? Because, you know, they're in Hayes, Great Bend, other places. You know, I don't know. You're the expert. I'm not, but what I'm dealing with is people. I'm not dealing with numbers. I'm not, you know, I'm just trying to find the answers for my folks. And I don't, you know, and while we're making progress in some places, and I know Osawatomie is very important, you know, is there anything we can offer folks that, you know, live up in Cheyenne County, you know, try to get a situation, get their child or get their even young adult stabilized?
Sure. Really, really critical. So, I mean, I think let me speak first to your KU piece. That's certainly our goal, and our hope is that KU, through their connections across the state and the way that they are part of so many hospitals in the state now, that would be the case. When we approve their application for the SIA beds, we will approve it for their system. At this point, they have only asked us related to Kansas City, but those are conversations we want to have with them. We also, and this also isn't, I know Hayes isn't Cheyenne County, and I don't know if this will happen or not, but when we put out the RFP for the kids' beds in Hayes, we also, on the adult side, also gave them the opportunity to propose either adult beds or crisis stabilization beds in addition to the acute beds for kids or adults. I don't know if any of the proposals did that. I guess the third thing I would say is on the mobile crisis response. Part of what that youth mobile crisis response will do, in addition to anywhere in the state having that immediate response if there's an acute crisis, but it will also be looking at where might we have, for example, what we might call these cool beds. Maybe it's an enhanced family home. I mean, not that the kid would be in foster care, but like a specialized family that has training and supports. Maybe it's 2 beds at an existing facility that could provide those sorts of cool beds, at least temporarily, to get to stabilization. So more to come on that as we continue to work with that contractor and roll that out. We just awarded the contract last week, but it does have some stabilization components around it, and it is statewide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Secretary Howard, for being here.
Thank you.
All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move on to the budget recommendations from the Agricultural and Natural Resources Budget Committee. So I'll now turn it over to Chairman Corbett. If you'll please indicate which budget you're going to be starting with. So Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. We're going to start with KCC, Volume 2, page 1460.
right, proceed.
Thank you. The agency estimates that FY21 revised expenditures are $23.1 million from all special revenue funds. This is a decrease of $157,197, or 0.7%, below the approved amount. The decrease is primarily due to the decreased expenditures on travel, communication services, gas, and gasoline due to COVID. The governor's recommendation, the governor concurs with the agency's FY21 revised estimate, and the House budget recommended the governor's recommendation.
All right, move on to 2022.
The agency for FY22 expenditures were $24.2 million from all special revenue funds. This is an increase of $1.2 million, or 5.0% above the FY21 revised estimate. The increase is due to an increased expenditures for consultant fees, utility programs, computer software, and service and equipment, and docket management system, and audiovisual. The governor's recommendation concurs with the agency's FY22 request, and the budget committee concurred with the governor's recommendations for 22.
All right, committee, are there any questions for Chairman Corbett? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Corbett, could you remind me, there was a pretty good jump in number of FTEs from 20 to 21.
Chairman Corbett.
Hang on. So the early one doesn't include vacant positions.
Say that again.
So the earlier number does not include any of the vacant positions.
Okay, so the 165 was the actual number of people, and
Yeah.
204 are including vacant positions. So how many are vacant then?
Of the two, I don't know. Hang on. Yeah, just the difference, just divide them out, 40-some.
Oh, they're still vacant then. Okay.
Yeah.
So why was it not shown as, I mean, that was just a mistake in 2020?
Looks like it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none, Chairman Corbett, make a motion.
I move that the budget recommendations for the KCC for 21 and 22 be approved by the Appropriations Committee.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Carlin. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next budget.
The next budget is the KDHE Volume 1, page 23.
All right, proceed.
The agency estimates revised for FY21 expenditures of $93.9 million, including $4.9 million from SGF for the Environment Division. This is an all funds increase of $24 million, or 34.4%, and the SGF increase of $243,319, or 0.052% above the FY21 approved amount. The SGF increase is due to the agency's laboratory equipment supplemental request. The all funds increase is primarily due to an additional expenditures of the CARES funds for the testing supplies and equipment. The all funds increase is also due to increased expenditures of 18.4 FTE positions in the laboratory. This revised estimate includes $884,321 in the state's water plan reappropriations, and the revised estimate includes 459.9 FTE positions, which is an increase of 18.4 positions above the FY21 approved number. The increase is due to an increased positions in the laboratory. The governor's recommendation for FY21 division expenditures of $93.3 million, including $4.3 million for SGF. This is a all funds decrease of $567,668 or 0.06%, including the SGF decrease of $601,418 or 12.2% below the agency's FY21 revised estimate. Both decreases are due to the governor's recommending a lapsing of $351,418 in the reappropriations from the FY20 into the 21 budget. The decreases are also due to the governor's not recommending the agency's supplemental request for laboratory equipment. The decrease is partially offset by an increase of $33,750 from the federal COVERS fund for wastewater surveillance. These funds will be used to test wastewater for general markers for COVID. The House Budget Committee recommends the House Budget Committee recommendation that concurs with the governor's recommendation for 21.
All right, committee, any questions for Chairman Corbett? Seeing none, move on to 2022.
22. The agency requests for FY22 expenditures of $72 million, including $4.7 million for FGF for the environmental division. This is an all funds decrease of $21.9 million or 23.3%, and an FGF decrease of $272,006 or 5.5% below the FY21 revised estimate. The SGF decreases is primarily due to decreased expenditures on communication services and laboratory equipment. The all funds decrease is due to a reduction in CARES funds, which occurred in 21. The request includes 459.9 FTE positions, which is the same in 21 revised number. The governor's recommendation, the governor recommends FY22 division of expenditures of $71.7 million, including 3.9 FGF. This is a decrease of $295,000 or 0.4% below the agency's FY22 request. The decrease is due to the governor's not recommending the agency's enhancement request for laboratory equipment. The House Budget Committee concurred with the governor's recommendation of FY22. And one comment was made in the committee that was there something last year, something restricting their fees for a while? When is that, 25?
Air quality fee.
Mm-hmm.
That's for 21 and 22.
So it's good for 21 and 22 currently? Just 21. Okay, just 21. So we didn't do anything with it. Someone brought that up as a discussion.
And that was the Air Quality Fee Fund? Is that correct? Okay. Committee, any questions for Chairman Corbett? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, we added lab workers. That was a big increase in FTEs there, but we're repeatedly not replacing lab equipment. Was there any discussion as to the impact of having lab workers without equipment, or was that just going to be extra lab equipment?
Hang on. So the increase for the employees was due to the COVID testing, and then it did not reflect the new equipment they didn't get.
Okay, so the new equipment was not COVID related then?
Correct.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, any further questions for Chairman Corbett? Seeing none, Chairman Corbett, you may make a motion.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I move the budget recommendations for KDHE Division of Environment for 21 and 22 be approved by the Appropriations Committee.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Carlin. You do not second it? You may.
There was Chairman Corbett, did you read the House Budget Committee recommendation on page 2 of that budget?
Yes, he did.
I thought we did.
To add $16,000 for antlers?
That's a different budget. We're on KDHE.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I
So do you
apologize. I will
second the
that
motion that
motion. Yes,
Chairman
I
Corbett
will.
made for KDHE?
I will, thank you.
All right, you've heard the second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, next budget, Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. This will be for the Kansas Water Office, Volume 1, page 667.
All right, proceed.
Thank you. The agency estimates revised for FY21 expenditures of $12.7 million, including $1 million from the State General Fund. This is an all funds increase of $975,809, or 7.2%, and an SGF decrease of $1,500, or 0.1%, below the FY21 approved amount. The SGF decrease was due to an inadvertent lapse of funds for hospitality expenditures. The all funds decrease is primarily due to decreased expenditures on the water injection dredging, dewatering projects, watershed conservation practices, and implementations caused by the inclusion of the governor's proposed allotment plan to decrease the state agency's water plan fund by $1.2 million. The proposed allotment plan requires legislative approval. These decreases are partially offset by increased expenditures on the flood study of the Arbuckle Group study at Milford Lake and watershed projects and reservoir surveys due to the state water fund reappropriations. The governor's recommendation. The governor recommends an FY21 expenditures of $12.7 million, including $1 million from SGF. This is an increase of $1,500, or less than 0.1%, all SGF funds above the agency's revised estimate. The increase is due to the governor's recommendation to additional funds for inadvertently lapsed from the agency's 21 revised estimate. The governor's recommendation includes the governor's proposed allotment plan to decrease the agency's water plan fund expenditures by $1.2 million in 21. The proposed allotment plan requires legislative approval, and the House Budget Committee concurred with the governor's recommendation.
So the allotment of the $1.2 million from the state water plan fund has to have legislative approval, correct?
That's what I'm told.
And the Budget Committee concurred that the legislature approved that allotment?
Yeah.
All right. Committee, any questions for fiscal year 2021? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, just kind of what sort of impact does that allotment have on the water, on the agency itself?
Hang on.
So there were enhancements added by the legislature last year. They aren't part of the base budget. They were enhancements added last year.
They were enhancements on last year's budget, not really part of this year's base budget.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, any further questions in regards to fiscal year 2021? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this would apply to 22 as well, but I was trying to look through and get a sense. We still have a fairly large increase in the all funds or other funds. Where are those dollars increasing over 2020 and even into 22? Where are we raising those other funds?
Hang on. So from 20 to 21, it's It's a Republican River project, and the funds are already fee funds for that project. And then, and in the next year, they have a 3 enhancement request that's causing that budget to be where it's at.
So thank you. I get where it is going. I was wondering, where do we come up with the money? Is it federal funds? Is it fee funds? Are we selling water contracts? Are we, what's happening there?
The state, say it again. So the enhancements are state water funds.
Okay. And so I'd still just be curious who we are collecting the state water funds from. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll get there.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did we answer, Steve, did you get an answer for your last question? Or Mr. Representative Johnson?
Either is fine by me, but no, not yet. I'd still
well,
be curious where it comes from.
Generally, the money from the State Water Plan Fund, if you look on page 669, the 2020 legislature transferred $2 million from State General Fund. So that is the primary funding mechanism for the State Water Plan Fund, is the State General Fund. Now, Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that brings me back to the allotment that happened in 21. Does that money stay in the State Water Plan Fund to be used for the next year, or does that just automatically reduce that State General Fund transfer?
It reduced the transfer.
By 1.2 million?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions for fiscal year 2021? Seeing none, move on to fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Chairman. The agency requests for FY22 expenditures of $15 million, including $1 million from SGF. This is an all-funds increase of $2.4 million, or 18.6%, and an SGF increase of $7,595, or 0.7% above the FY21 revised estimate. The SGF increase is due to increased expenditures on group health insurance and supplies for the Governor's Water Conference in 22, which was held virtually in FY21. The all funds increase is primarily due to the agency's dewatering project, the Arbuckle group study, watershed conservation practices, water technology farms, and water injection dredging enhancement request. The Governor recommends that FY22 expenditures of $13.3 million, including $922,239,000 from SGF. This is an all funds increase of $591,476 above the FY21 recommendation, but a decrease of $1.8 million, or 11.9%, and an SGF decrease of $100,977, or 9.9% below the agency's 22 request. The SGF decrease is due to the Governor's recommending the implementation of the agency's reduced sources of budget. This SGF decrease is partially offset by the SGF increase caused by the Governor's recommending the inclusion of $1,494, which was inadvertently omitted from the agency's 22 request. This all funds decrease is due to the Governor's not recommending the agency's Arbuckle group study or their water injection dredging. The Governor also partially recommended the agency's watershed conservation practices enhancement. The House budget recommendation concurs with the recommendation of FY22 with the following adjustments. Add $150,000 from the State Water Fund for 22 for a study of the Arbuckle group formation and rock formation used for the fluid water disposal and oil production and fresh water. Add $850,000 from the State Water Plan Fund for the water injection and dredging of Tuttle Creek for 22. The increase, the transfer from the Economic Development Initiative Fund to the State Water Plan Fund by $1 million. This would bring the total transfer recommended by the Budget Committee to $1.7 million for FY22. Decrease the transfer from the Economic Development Incentives Fund to the State Water Fund by $1 million for 22.
So the additional transfer, as we referenced in the previous question from on page 669, in the 2020 legislature, $2 million came from SGF and $413,000 came from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. The committee's proposal is that $1 million is going to be funding these two programs?
Correct.
Okay. So that's an increase of almost $600,000 over last year from the Economic Initiatives Fund.
Yep, correct.
All right. Committee, any questions for fiscal year 2022? All right, seeing none. Chairman Corbett, may I make a motion?
I move that the budget recommendation for the Kansas Water Office for 21 and 22 be approved as amended by the Appropriations Committee.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, second by Representative Carlin. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Chairman Corbett.
The next one is the Kansas Wildlife and Parks, Volume 1, page 638.
All right, proceed.
The agency estimates revised FY21 total expenditures of $91.5 million, including $951,371 from the State General Fund. This is an increase of $1.1 million or 1.2% above from all the special revenue funds above the FY21 approved amount. The agency estimates revised FY21 capital improvement expenditures of $15.9 million, including $951,371,000 from SGF. This is the same amount of the approved amount. The agency estimates revised FY21 operating expenditures of $75.6 million from all special revenue funds. This is an increase of $1.1 million or 1.5% above FY21 approved amount. The increase is primarily due to expenditures on advertising and increased expenditures on federal funds for sport fishing restoration program to create recreational fishing opportunities in Kansas. The revised estimate includes 464 FTE positions, which is an increase of 2 FTE positions above the approved number. The increase is due to the hiring of an accounting specialist in the administration program and the environmental associate in the fisheries program. The governor's recommendation recommends in 21 total expenditures of $91.8 million, including $951,371 SGF. This is an increase of $331,785, or 0.04% of all special revenue funds above the agency's FY21 revised estimate. The governor concurs with the agency's FY21 revised capital improvement estimate. The governor recommends FY21 operating expenditures of $76 million from all special revenue funds. This is an increase of $331,785, or 0.04% above the agency's FY21 revised estimate. This increase is entirely due to the governor, including a transfer from the fund for the agency. This transfer was approved after the agency submitted its budget. These funds are anticipated to be used for telecommunication, equipment, and cleaning supplies. The House Budget Committee recommendation. The Budget Committee concurs with the Governor's recommendations for FY21 with the following adjustments. Add $16,001 from the Wildlife Fund to reimburse Tim Nadeau for the purchase of his deer antlers sold at an auction, and the issue him a salvage tag for Tim Nadeau's deer antlers. Anyway, hang on. Where am I at here? 21.
I think there's some comments by Representative Carlin in regards to this item.
Yeah. Go.
Actually, no, I just was on the wrong page. I apologize. I wanted to be sure it was read into the committee. This has been around for a long time. It's been through the claims against the state several times. It's been in the committee several times, but we have a new chairman, and now it's on our budget. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Chairman Corbett? Representative Carpenter.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Corbett, could you explain that to me, please?
Yes, sir, I'll do the best I can. So about a year ago, in January, we got a phone call from Secretary Lovelace, Representative Dietrich, myself, Secretary Lovelace, Senator Hensley were to meet in his office regarding this issue. So we all got there. There was a minute conversation. The secretary said, we're here to have a state auction on these deer antlers. He put down his cell phone and put it on speaker in the middle of the table. And he said on the other end of the line was somebody from Bass Pro. No, I couldn't tell you whether that was Bass Pro or not. The thing that I've kind of found amazing about that is if a secretary could do an auction in a senator's office for a set of deer antlers, could he do the same thing for a Suburban or anything else? I mean, it was somewhat bizarre to begin with. And there was comments made that day, and it was planned to go through. So there was only two people there, one bidder that we could see and somebody on the phone, and they started it, and that's how it went. And that's all I can tell you.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make a motion to pull out that $16,001. I think it's inappropriate to have the people of the state of Kansas pay for antlers bought at an auction already refused by the Claims Against the State Committee. This is a very dangerous precedent.
All right. There's been a motion to strike out item number 1 in the House Budget Committee recommendation, second by Representative Wolfmore. Discussion on the motion. Chairman Corbett.
In the previous part of this situation, when this situation happened in the court system in Osage County, the judge awarded Mr. Nadeau $8,000 for trespassing. The guy that poached the deer said he shot it on Tim's property. The amazing part of this whole story, when it was in court, not one person from Kansas Wildlife and Parks had anything to say. And there will be no money to this because it's just returning money that was already paid. I mean, that's the way it is. But the frustrating part of this thing, we've passed a bill in this House for landowners to receive their antlers. When it was in court, the department had nothing to say, but they've had a lot to say since then. So whatever your decision is, I think it was wrong how it was handled, and you all can do whatever you want.
Representative Helgerson.
I kind of don't know where to start. I agree. This shouldn't be in the report, and I agree with the 16,000. But the idea that a secretary has a senator and a representative, anybody else in, selling personal property that's in a questionable lawsuit, I'm still a little unsure where we're at. Now, it may be that this motion, first of all, needs to be addressed, and then I'll ask the rest of my questions. Get on the speed call again.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd have plenty of questions about the auction, but in the claims against the state, this was went through that committee, and they did not recommend it. Do we have any information as to why they did not recommend it and the vetting that they would have done?
Representative, I was there for the first day and wasn't privy to whatever was turned in for whatever evidence. But I think the keystone to this whole situation is when you have a court proceeding in the county where the action took place and you didn't have the ability or have the desire to show up to voice your opinion, you can't, once it's over, you shouldn't be able to reopen and retry and retalk and do whatever and make up any stories you want. Everybody had their day in court. The department decided not to participate. That's the start of it. And the auction was just, or whatever it was, it's been a strange thing since I've been here, and you all know that. And this was just trying to put it to bed, get his money back, and go home.
But let's keep in mind that this was under a different secretary than the one that we currently have, what Chairman Corbett is referencing to.
Well, the secretary at the auction was the one we had.
Yes, I understand that. But we're talking about the court proceeding where the secretary did not show up. That was a completely different secretary of the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. There are a lot of nuances to this particular case. Many of you also served on the Ag Committee when we had a hearing in regards to this. I carried the first bill in regards to landowners having the first right of refusal in regards to the antlers. The next year that came, the individual that we're talking about right now wanted to change the statute to be retroactive. Then I had issues and concerns with that particular bill. Representative Francis.
You know, I just want to go back to some of the things you've said. We've heard about this for years and years, and there's been multiple bills put forward. If there's a problem with what the secretary did, I think that deserves an investigation. But to arbitrarily pay an individual $16,000 for something that happened, I think someone told me in 2011, I don't think this is the appropriate place for that to happen. Thank you.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, this really doesn't have anything to do with the auction or any of that kind of stuff. It really has to do with an issue that this already being denied by claims against the state and then paid for, recommended in this budget. So just so we're clear, that was news to me, and it wouldn't matter to me. This is just that issue right there of setting a very dangerous precedent of putting claims against the denied claims against the state in our budget. So just so we're clear on that. Thank you.
Chairman Corbett.
We're really not putting the claims against the state in this budget. Basically, when you're talking about the state paying money for this, in my view of this, it's just asking for the money to be returned to the situation.
Well, the only thing I would say is that under the public trust doctrine, that is what the previous Secretary of the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism said, that the state began ownership of those antlers. It was not personal property, it was state property. And when you have an individual entering into an auction, whether the party on the phone is questionable or not, and he agreed to pay $16,001 and then to come back later and have him reimbursed for the winning bid, I agree with the motion. This is a very tricky precedent, and I don't think this is something that we should enter into.
So,
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don't we normally put together a claims against the state bill and we pass the entire thing out?
We do. Actually, the Senate has had that introduced, and they had a hearing on the claims against the state. I believe it was last week.
Okay. It seems to me like that might be, I remember another representative on this committee had one that was always being brought up, and I think he actually ended up finding success by amending that bill on the floor, the claims against the state. That might be a more appropriate avenue if we really want this to get done. That might be a more appropriate avenue to follow.
Representative
Thank you,
Carlin.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, if I remember correctly, the Representative Alcala brought, excuse me, I'd like to explain. The Claims Against the State Committee approved payment of that repeatedly, and then it was pulled out in committees and conference committees and budgets through the next few years, and that's why it kept coming back. But the Claims Against the State had always agreed with it, in my memory. And it was the legislators that took it out after the Claims Committee had put it forward. So that's why it's different. This is different, completely different. Thank you.
Well, from my knowledge on that situation, it was never approved by the claims against the state. It was not. Chairman Corbett?
When we were in committee, Representative Alcala did say that she did receive money for that claim.
Yeah, but that was actually an action made by the governor.
Okay.
He instructed the Kansas Highway Patrol. But we don't need to rehash that deal.
Yep.
Let's talk about what we're talking about now. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, Representative Carpenter, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion to strike item number 1 from the House Budget Committee recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on fiscal year 2021? All right, committee, we are to be on the floor at 11 o'clock. We did not get through 2022. We'll resume discussion on that tomorrow when we come back at 9 a.m. So until tomorrow at 9 a.m., we are adjourned.
I'm sorry, we got one more day.